All right, folks. Risk mitigation. They sound like they're belong in a corporate safety manual, and you've probably already seen something like that. Corporate safety manual that nobody's ever read or ever opened. But actually, these two words are the single biggest difference between a long career and a very short one in the aviation business. All right. I Before we even get started here, I want to be upfront. Risk mitigation is not really an aviation concept. It's not a drone concept. It's a life concept. Uh, Framework that we're going to work through today. I've used it many times in the past to decide whether to fly through a line of thunderstorms or not. I've used it to decide whether to continue a night approach and weather going down. And I'm not even kidding. I've used it to decide whether to let my teenager kid borrow the car. Uh, Checklist is the same. The stakes vary. And maybe I've talked about this before, but aviation in general has a very narrow margin for error. You can walk down the street, and the odds of tripping on the curb, yeah, and the consequences of tripping on the curb, not that bad. You stumble a little bit. But in aviation, the consequences of errors are greater. So, anyway, we're going to talk about what risk is, and it's not what most people think, really. How to measure it before it measures you. The FAA gives you some tools to stay alive and to stay legal. And we're going to talk a little bit about why smart people make dumb decisions sometimes under pressure. Um, and maybe, hopefully, help you to build your own personal safety net before you even turn the airplane on. So, anyway, so let me tell you a story before we get there. I will go to the next slide here, just for grins. 11 o'clock at night, small regional airport in my aviation career, the kind where the fixed base operator closes at 6 o'clock, opens up at 8 in the morning, and the only company you have is a vending machine and a chicken sandwich left over from yesterday. So been awake since 5 in the morning. It's 18 hours um awake. Airplane's a freighter, not passengers. Good machine, reliable, full load of cargo. Somewhere back there, there are 6 crates of Maine lobsters ready to go to a fancy restaurant a couple hundred miles away. Okay, so weather at the destination, it's overcast skies, 900-foot overcast, 3 mile visibility with mist. Forecast, according to the dispatcher called, and never forget the phrase, he said the weather, guesser, at about that time I arrived, it'd be down to 501 mile. So weather's deteriorating. I was aware of that. Alternate airport, if you the one you have to have for your flight plan, you have to be able to have an alternate that's good enough weather. So if you had to divert, and you have to have enough fuel to get there, stuff like that. It was at the minimums as an alternate. So pretty much, if I don't go there, it's going to be a little difficult to go to the alternate, but doable and legal. One icing pilot report between me and the destination. So anyway, dispatcher says, yeah, it'll probably be okay. Yeah, okay. And then, of course, my boss calls and says, well, lobsters have a very narrow window before they start to die in their crates. Well, I'm already aware of that, of course, but he said that if I had, that he said as if I was the one who personally promised that they'd arrive alive, right? So there's some pressure from him. I'm fairly new, not brand new, but fairly new to this particular job, so I'm trying to get along and trying to impress people. So that's that bonus online. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, it'll probably be okay. But I didn't go. I started running through the risk factors that I could identify, all that I could come up with. I sat down and told my dispatcher, I can't do this trip. It's just too marginal. Uh, the relief pilot, they called somebody else in. We were at base, so they could call somebody in. He went, ended up diverting the lobsters live late anyway. Um, Restaurants, made something less than lobsters out of it. Anyway, nobody died. Darwin was denied his prize. I kept my certificate. My boss was ticked, but not that bad. So anyway, I'm telling the story not because I was some kind of hero, make a right decision, a wrong decision, whatever. It was just the way it goes. But I had a framework in my head. I already knew that there was going to be risk, and I evaluated those risks, and I did what I thought was best with the information that I had. Uh, that's all you can do in life is do the best decision you can with the information that we have. I had to get all the information. I had to get the weather. I had to get the alternate weather. And all of those details I need to have. But anyway, that's what we're building today. Some kind of a way that you can go through life in general, but aviation specifically, go through it and go, okay, here's the framework. Here's what we might consider. How do we do that? Okay, so move on. So hazard versus risk is not the same thing, but there's a distinction that sometimes gets blurred. Hazard's a condition, okay, an object or a situation that has the potential to cause harm to you. It exists completely independent of you. It's something outside of you. Power lines at the edge of the field. That's a hazard. Been there since forever. They don't care if you're here or not. We've got all of this property here where we're doing these lessons. Power lines all over the place. Well, they're there. But risk is what you create when you introduce yourself to that hazard. Risk is the possibility or the probability of the hazard reaching out and smacking you in the face. It goes up and down. The probability of that happening goes up and down based on what you decide to do about it. A rattlesnake in the Arizona desert is a hazard, right? Walking barefoot through the desert at night after a few beers, that's a risk, and you take that on. Snake's always been there, perhaps. You choose how close you're going to get to it. For UAV operators, that's us. Your hazard list starts before you even charge the battery. Power lines, spectators, your own fatigue, uh, questionable motors, even a questionable battery, power not charging well. Those are all hazards, every one of them. The risk is what you create when you decide to operate and in what manner you do operate. FAA, Advisory Circle 107 2B, pretty explicit, says risk is a function of probability and severity. How likely is something going to happen? And if it happens, how catastrophic is that going to be? Um, so basically, if I say dead battery, is it a hazard or is it a risk? Well, it starts out as a hazard, but it has a potential failure mode. You launch it anyway, when it's only got 15% charge. That's you turned that into a risk. So this introduces this whole concept of a risk matrix. You may have already seen this, but anyway, again, FAA's published an advisory circular about this issue, 107-2B. You might want to look it up. It's online. It's free. Download it. Read it through it. But anyway, it gives this illustration. Two building blocks of any risk assignment, probability, and severity. I already mentioned that, right? There's two axes. Put them together. You get a risk matrix. Tells you whether you should launch or modify your plan or don't take off. You have your decision to make. There we go. Okay, so um, we've got the probability, right, from low to high of something going bad, and the risk severity is also from low to high. So here's where we get in trouble. Let's just look at one. Let's talk about probability. So probability is low over here. Probability is low. Um, they have a tendency to. We have a tendency to look at just one thing. Probability low. but they forget about the severity of the issue. Let's see. How about a probability that a main rotor blade fails on a commercial airliner on a given flight, right? Airliners, intensive inspections, it's probably almost zero, right? Very small. It's almost impossible for that to happen. But if it does happen on a commercial airliner, that makes something that's low priority high risk. Because if it happens, the engine's going to fall off, or you're going to lose an engine, and you're going to have to land. I mean, maybe not high risk, but it's definitely a medium risk because it's pretty severe. Yeah, one engine failure on a commercial airliner isn't going to cause generally speaking, isn't going to cause the airplane to crash. The DC-10 crash, DC-10 was it? Or MD-11 crash in Louisville. The engine didn't just fail; it flipped over the back of the wing. There was a whole separate thing. Uh, Way more to it. But anyway, low probability but a high severity gives you a medium risk. Um, so you got to work out both. You got to go to the probability, but you also have to do the severity when you go through the risk assessment. Um, you need, remember that Part 107, paragraph 49 says our responsibility under Part 107 regulations is we have to do a pre-flight inspection, familiarization, and pre-flight, but also a risk assessment that's required in the regulation. Well, this matrix is that assessment, not just a classroom exercise that we blow through this and go, whatever. This is your legal obligation. And in case of an accident, you need to be able to verbally explain how you work through this. That will be your defense. Okay, let's see. Flying over a crowd without authorization. That's one that would be high probability, high severity. Yeah. So anyway, you have to work through it yourself. I'm trying to think of other examples. Other examples might be um, getting hit by a meteorite. Pretty low probability, but if you get hit by a meteorite, it's probably going to kill you. Or the falling space station. I guess the International Space Station is scheduled to re-enter in the next 5 years, I think. Well, getting hit by that, it's pretty odds. Odds are the planet's a big planet, right? Probably low probability. However, high risk. If it does hit you, it's going to be catastrophic. Okay, that's sort of ridiculous. But okay, so the FAA gives you some helpful checklists, right? And again, they may look sort of silly at first, but they're trying to help give you some memory aids to think through. So these are some of them. What are you going to do? Pave it or grave it? That's funny. I think that's pretty funny. But anyway, it's a framework that the aviation community, has worked through the years and thinking through, okay, this will help. And it perfectly fits into the UAV operations, right? There are categories of risk inputs that feed directly into probability and severity, right? So for starting out with the P. P is you, basically the pilot. RPC, remote pilot command, RPIC rather, or pilot command, however you want to phrase it. The questions are that you need to ask yourself in this checklist are you, basic one is, are you a proficient in this particular aircraft? Are you actually current? You've had your uh, 24 calendar month recurrent training. Have you flown this model recently enough to have there's a lot of muscle memory involved in flying? Uh, are you fit today? Do you have enough rest, etc.? Or are you sick and you're taking medicine, right? So all those things qualify. A for aircraft is the aircraft airworthiness, battery charge, firmware current, propellers undamaged, right? So that's what you have to check. The environment for V, okay, they got a little goofy here because they had to use the V in the middle. Wind, uh, is it helpful? Um, you know, obstacles, airspace. Did you check the NOTAMs? Are there any TFRs? Did you walk around, look a bit, look at all the possible obstacles might be out there? Um, I've seen people. We were at a park bench. We were doing a field trip, and he put the Phantom Pro underneath the bench, and he was fixing to power it on. And I said, "Hey, uh, what's the deal here?" So he pulled it out from underneath the thing. It dawned on him, okay, he's being silly. He laughed. We laughed. Okay, no problem. So he moved it over a little bit, and then he's fixing to start it up. And I looked up and I said, "Is that a tree branch above the bench here?" Yep. Okay, so he was being pretty oblivious as far as the environment. Those are all important things. Safety guide wires, um, telephone, power lines. Yeah, that's part of the deal. External pressures, the E part, you being rushed, or even the first few times you fly your drone in public, downtown Thomaston, we're on the curve and we're making sure we're not going to be flying over any people or moving vehicles, but still we're trying to fly and there's got people looking at us. You might even have the police there nearby. There's a tendency to be a little nervous. Okay, so even that alone can be distracting. But it may be your client's rushing. You'll get her done now. I got to get this now. Um, or how about your ego? Um, and we'll talk about that later. Are you pushing past your comfort zone or your already pre-planned concept? External pressure. This can be phrased a different way. This we came all this way to do this job, um, right? So think about that. That's part of it. Um, so think about this. This is a little scenario. Hired to photograph a downtown construction site. It's nearby a Class D airport. It's your second time flying this aircraft. You've only owned the aircraft for a couple of weeks. Client just called and needs a shot 90 minutes for a board meeting or something like that. Okay, so yeah, there's definitely some risk there. Some environmental risks because it's Class D airport nearby. So we're looking for traffic. You have permission, assuming that it's within this Class D airspace. Controlled airspace zone, you've already got permission, but if you're on the edge of it, we're aware of the fact that there's environmental issues. There's some pressure because you've just been told 90 minutes that you got to get her done. You got to provide those pictures. So there's external pressures. There's pressures, the fact that you're sort of new to the aircraft. Um, so there's many built up already. So anyway, so okay, so now I want to show you why just saying no on a PAVE checklist isn't enough to cause an accident on its own, right? So if one of these things says no, you're not ready, or the aircraft's not ready, maybe not no, but all three of them need to be checked as okay, and that's the Swiss cheese model. Swiss cheese, Swiss cheese model um, gives us defensive layers. So the lines have to line up. I don't know if you know what Swiss cheese is, but I'm assuming you've seen that have little holes in them. One hole, which sort of represent errors. So if they all line up and no one of them gets checked off. I mean, if you're tired and there's an issue with the pilot, but yet the aircraft, the weather, the planning, and all the procedures are in line, whatever error will be caught before it becomes an accident, is basically the theory. One hole rarely causes the accident because if the aircraft's defective for some reason, but everybody else is working, all those other factors are working, you'll catch the error because you'll eventually, probably pretty quickly, if the battery's low, you'll go, oh my goodness, the battery's only 15%, I need to land. Well, the aircraft itself will tell you that because it'll say low battery, returning to home, probably. That makes sense. Each hole is a weakness or possible failure, but they have to all line up because the other ones are there to catch that error before it gets caught. And we have a whole list of aviation accidents, historical aviation accidents, that have shown that multiple errors that were not caught slip through this whole process and cause the actual accident or incident. So when the holes align, basically every single defense layer fails. At the same time, hazard travels through all of them unimpeded and tends to end up in an accident. Um, so at the lobster story, the very beginning of the story, okay, the pilot was the first hole. 18 hours awake, fatigue impairing my judgment. That's one. Weather layer hole was another. Destination falling below minimums by arrival time. That was the next hole. Alternate airport. Uh, Minimums with no margin for error there. Okay, and external pressures were dispatcher, boss, lobsters all pushing me to get this job done. So four holes. If they were all perfectly in alignment, if I had taken that flight, the arrow goes straight through to accident. Who stopped me? Added one more layer. What stopped me from doing that job and accepting all of those holes and going through that uh, was a deliberate systematic risk assessment that I used to work through that decision making process. So and again, I'm not saying I'm some kind of hero. I'm just saying that I took the systematic risk assessment seriously and said, "Wow, there's just way too many risks here. That if they all line up, I'm going to run out of gas and end up in the woods somewhere, and the lobster's going to die, and I'll probably be hurt and lose my job." That's not the bottom line, but anyway, you can't eliminate the holes. There's always going to be holes because we're human beings. There are always going to be holes. There's going to be things happen, especially on a personal level. Human wise, we have these holes because we're human beings. So you can't create perfect cheese. What you can do is add some layer of defense to make sure your holes never line up simultaneously. Okay. Think about that pave checklist on the wall over there. Pave checklist is a layer. I'm safe checklist is another layer. Every time you do a NOTAM check, every pre-flight, every weather brief, one more layer of Swiss cheese between you and a bad day. So I'm safe checklist. That's specifically about the pilot. So let's move on to that. The I'm safe checklist is basically you. Let's be more specific about you because we have lots of we have some physiological issues and some other issues, but this is basically about the physiological. If you're sick, if you got a sinus headache, if you're a little sick to the stomach, um, any of these illnesses go from the extreme, like a migraine, which you can't even see straight, to just a simple sinus headache. They all degrade your decision making ability. The I M is medication. If you're under over the counter, OTC is over the counter or prescription drugs. Antihistamines, decongestants, many common cold medicines. It will impair judgment, may cause drowsiness, which is not helpful. But the FAA has a site for airplane pilots, for manned aircraft pilots that they can check in with, and of course, manned aircraft pilots have to check and have to have medical exams periodically, which they have the opportunity to call their doctor, their aviation doctor, and say, "Hey, is this medicine okay to fly?" And if the doctor says no, then you either don't take the medicine or you don't fly until you've stopped taking the medicine. Anyway, medication is important. It could be either over the counter or prescription drugs. Well, for drone pilots, we don't have medical certification standards, so this is all, again, you recall the regulations, right? If we know or have reason to know that we have any condition that would prevent us from operating safely, we self-diagnose. So, but keep that, be aware of that. Okay, then stress, of course. Stress narrows your attention field. You start fixating on one thing and missing a lot of other things. It's called tunnel vision. It's a documented factor in aviation accidents. We have examples of this happening. You're dealing with something significant today, a family situation, financial crisis, major work problems. You need to honestly assess whether or not your head is in the game. You're fully participating in this. Um, Elvis Presley had a saying for his crew, an early crew, TCB. In fact, he had an airplane that he'd fly around. Him and his guys would fly around to go to the different sites. And on the side end of on the tail of the airplane had TCB on there. And so what does that mean? Take care of business. When you're doing business, take care of business. When you're recreating, leisure, all these other things, fine. Get stressed out. But if you're doing business, pay attention to business. Do that at least. Um, you owe um, you owe full attention to your business. So stress, you have to somehow figure out a way to reduce the stress level in your life, or compartmentalize it somehow so it's not affecting. But that's if your stress level is too high and you just all stressed out, don't do it. Don't fly. A for alcohol, obviously. You know the standards: 8 hours or zero point 0.04. But Part 107, paragraph 19. You get it right. The impairment may linger past 8 hours. So you have some responsibility to self-diagnose. Fatigue is a huge issue as well. It's a number of accidents, and I'd love to spend another 45 minutes talking about uh, several accidents that have already happened, but I'm not going to do that. Fatigue is the most underestimated risk in aviation. Really, tired operators make they're really sure that they're right, so they're confident that they make these wrong decisions over and over again. And wow, it just seems like how could you make you go back to to the cockpit recordings and you go, what were they thinking? Uh, really, um, research shows that 17, 19 hours of continuous wakefulness produces a cognitive impairment equivalent to a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. If you're awake for 24 hours, you're now functionally at about 10% of alcohol level. So you're legally drunk. Your behavior, your mental capacity would, you're not actually legally drunk, but you'd be at that level of, you know, anyway. And that's the funny part about it is like alcohol. It's like you think you're doing great. You know, you're bad. You're very do a poor job of self-assessing your own fatigue. You think you're great. You think you're doing fine, but simulator dated, yeah, you're not. Okay. E for emotion. Okay, so blood sugar crash or emotion. So there's two things here that we need to make a point. Uh, blood sugar crashes are real, uh, but if sometimes you're on the job, man. You all I've been all day without eating, and I don't even think about eating. I'm not even feeling hungry, but I'm going. Man, I'm so interested in what I'm doing here, and I'm so engrossed in what I'm doing that I'm not even thinking about that. But that definitely can have a debilitating effect. And of course, emotional distraction. If you're very mad at some situation, or you just finished a screaming phone call right before you launched, you and your significant other have just had an argument. Yeah, it eats attention that your aircraft needs. So anyway, go through this checklist, and every yes puts a whole um, every yes on this. If you're physically ill or you've got medication issues, or if you have stress issues, yes. If you have alcohol issues, if you have fatigue issues, if you have eating or emotional issues, every time you say yes, it's another hole in your cheese. If you line several of them up, you got more holes. So I'm not suggesting that you can forget about the medication part because that's just you got other holes that are going to be plugged up. But still, you want to try to solve all of these before you fly. Okay. So part 107. Part 107 speaks about risk obligations. 107 paragraph 19 talks about the remote pilot um, responsibility. You're responsible for um, and final authority for all the operation of the aircraft. So you are directly responsible, not you're partially. You can't blame it on somebody else. You can't say somebody pressured me into going. No, you're directly responsible. So you're responsible for that. So risk mitigation sounds like just a soft concept until it shows up on the FAA enforcement action. So the regulations are important. We are responsible. Your client can't absorb any of the legal consequences. Employer can't do that. Dispatcher can't. The FAA opens an investigation. You're the one they're going to look at. Part 107, paragraph 49, pre-flight familiarization, prior to every flight, right? Assess the operating environment, aircraft airworthiness, brief crews, confirm the operation can be conducted safely. So that covers all of these items. The FAA expects you to, and legally requires you to, assess all of these things before every flight. Um, before you take off, you're confirming that your operation can be conducted safely, which includes your person as well as all of the other factors we mentioned. And then the last one is risk guidance from AC 107. I've already talked about Advisor Circle 107-2B. Um, gives you that's basically the tool where the FAA can give you. It's pretty long. I'm not asking you to memorize it, of course, but you should have a copy and electronic copy. You can get a physical copy if you want, but you should think through the risk assessment tools we talked about. Um, so anyway, what you should memorize is ignorance is not a defense. If you looked at weather and said, it's probably okay, that's not risk mitigation. It's wishful thinking. The FAA does not grade on that curve for wishful thinking. I do mean that documenting your risk assessment is a shield, a protection, a complete pre-flight risk assessment, weather check, flight log entry, even better yet. That becomes evidence that you have done these three. You've um, taken seriously and documented the fact that you covered at least paragraph 19 and paragraph 49. Um, some kind of a log entry, a little checklist that you can actually put the date on it and the location and the time and check off so that's going to matter if there is an enforcement action. Okay, so if you assess the risk, what do you do about it? We've got some strategies. The FAA has given some strategies for handling that as well, mitigation strategies. We can avoid the risk, simply don't fly. 100% effective. Uh, However, we've also said that there's no way aviation involves risk, always involves risk. The only safe way we can fly is never fly. So we have to accept some risk. I get it. Um, Nobody's ever been hurt in an aircraft in a flight that's never flown. Zero aircraft have been destroyed on a mission that was canceled, right? But you know, that is an ego issue though, because telling your client I can't fly today or your boss, whatever, it becomes a little bit of an ego thing. Um, Saying to them I can't fly safely today, it's not really a weakness, but it's professionalism. Really, that's what separates trained operators from somebody that just bought a drone on Amazon. Think about that. Um, and certainly, whenever you do say that, make that statement to your employer or your client, you probably gonna have to back it up with some facts. So, how did you make that decision? Now, maybe they don't want to know that. They may not want to know it, but at least be prepared to be able to verbalize why you're canceling. Okay. The second would be reduce, change something. Obviously, uh, you can fly, but you need to change. This is what you're most normally going to have to do. Is go, okay, well, we're going to fly, unless it's just impossible. The things are so severe, but we're going to change something to lower the probability or reduce the severity of a bad outcome. Um, you've assessed the risk. You decided to operate, so change about how you do it. You're in a residential area, fly lower, slower to reduce that kinetic energy that might, if the drone failed and crashed into somebody's property, it wouldn't damage the property, right? The visibility is not very good. You gotta have 3 miles, of course, but if it's sort of, the way the sun's shining and all that, just come a little bit closer. Don't fly so far away, right? Conservative, be conservative. intentionally reducing the risk uh, in specific actions, not just say, "Well, just be careful." That's just wishful thinking again. Transfer, shift to another party doesn't really reduce the hazard itself, but um, transfer doesn't really reduce the hazard, it doesn't really make you safer, but it moves the financial and legal consequences to someone else if possible. Usually an insurance carrier. Having whole insurance, liability coverage, that's important for a professional drone because sometimes things are just going to go bad. Every commercial operator should have both. Insure the aircraft. If you spend a bunch of money on an aircraft, yeah, you probably need to insure it. And liability, that's super important because you can be sued your pants off. So anyway, that's when the FAA investigates an incident. They're not really going to call your insurance company. Of course, your certificate is not insurable, but if you can explain the risk factors and how you are mitigating it, but sometimes bad things happen. Um, so having liability, so that's possible. That's a legitimate thing. Number three is a legitimate thing to handle risk. Number four is to accept the risk. Once you've done everything right, completed every checklist, made every reasonable attempt, and verified every system, there's still going to be a little bit of a risk, or maybe a lot of risk. But it always does. Flying's risky, as I've already said. Driving's risky. Life is risky. But we've done the best we can to handle and reduce risk as much as possible. So it's not reckless to fly if you've done these things. It's informed decision making. So at this point, done everything you can, launch with confidence and with a clear conscience. But sometimes our personalities get in the way because we internally give ourselves pressure, and there's external pressure as well. But warning signs, we've talked about this in a different context, in order the context of passing the actual written test. But now we're just talking about real life because the test is not everything. Um, so we've talked about checklists and frameworks and risk matrix. All of that works. What stops you from using it probably is most of the time some kind of a pressure, either internal or external. Um, we call it get there-itis. You drove all the way out there. Let's get her done. It's not from stupidity. It comes from a completely normal human emotions. Not You don't want to disappoint people. You don't want to waste a trip. You don't want people to think you're incompetent. You don't want to lose the business. This guy is looking to you, or this guy or gal is looking to you to do something for him. These are all rational feelings in every other context, but in the cockpit or in the operator position as a drone pilot, it can get you killed, and we do have examples where that has happened. Anyway, um, warning signs. We came all this way. One more pass. Client's right there watching. I can probably make it. So those are some of the things that you can that happen. Okay. Um, so we also have antidotes. You've heard that terminology before in the FA exam, but this is in a different context. Um, Antidote for we came all this way is decide before the pressure starts. Before you even start the job, decide how far you're gonna go. How close to those minimums are you gonna go? Maybe even have it on your checklist. Say, okay, if the weather's worse than this, if the wind's higher than this, for this close, that many people. I don't want to cover every possibility, but there's that. Also, two, an antidote is step away for a minute. Just get away from the person that might be pressuring you. Say, just need a minute here, uh, because you're the pilot in command, and you're responsible. And use the regulation as a shield, right? Paragraph 19 specifically says um, legally required to assess this, and this is my results from my assessment. So, how are they going to argue with that? How is somebody going to argue with that? And that also calms your mind a little bit because you're doing what's right. Uh, and reframe what's at stake. Just remember again, your certificate's on the line, your aircraft's on the line, liability, you know, that's all something to consider. These things don't grow back if you lose them. You don't get a new aircraft, you got to find the money to come up with it. Your integrity, definitely, you lose that. Your certificate, um, a certificate action is a major thing. So anyway, just consider these possibilities. So, personal risk management system, consider this as part of, you need to write up your own checklist. I mean, there are checklists available, and some drone manufacturers embed that into the aircraft, but they're probably not talking about your personal risk management. Um, but anyway, we'll start with number one. I'm safe before you touch the aircraft, before you load the mission, before you even look at the weather, before you need to do, it would be good for you to do an honest self-reflection. Are you fit to operate? Nobody can do that for you. Step two is that PAVE checklist. Assess the operation, the pilot, the aircraft, the environment, uh, obstacles, NOTAMs, external pressures. Have them, maybe even say them out loud if you have to. Naming them tends to make them smaller. Step three, perhaps go through a risk matrix. Take what you found in those other PAVE and think about it. Probability and severity for each significant finding. Are you in the green, yellow, or the red? Step four, mitigation. What do you need to do to get out of the red? Put red into yellow, or if you got something in yellow, make it green. Choose your strategy. You can avoid, we've already mentioned it, avoid it, reduce it, transfer it via insurance, or accept it. And then be careful as you fly. Conscientious, deliberate choices. Don't want to be reduced to, I'll just be careful today, or I'll be more careful today. That's not adequate. And step five, of course, document it. Okay, really helpful. I mean, you don't want to end up with a 10-page essay on why today is safe. I mean, you can't. You don't have the time to do that. Some kind of quick line in your flight log, like site survey complete, pave clear, I'm safe clear, wind 7 knots, Class G airspace, launch. 30 seconds of documentation that proves that you took your 107 paragraph 49 obligation seriously. It's a shield. Then you produce this thing if, hopefully not, but if you do get a violation or something does go wrong, which that happens. So it'd be a good idea to actually write some of this stuff down. Otherwise, it just, you know how it is with lectures, comes in one ear out the other. I get it, but writing down or starting to work on your own personal checklist um, would be helpful. Anyway, systematic. The goal here is systematic risk management, not about being timid or being afraid to fly, or you know, it's about being around long enough to fly another day. Oh boy.